This is Group 3, and our presentation focuses on increasing compassion in police officers to support public safety and community well being. We start off by explaining the Figley's compassion fatigue process model, which you can see on the screen right now. This model explains how caring professionals develop compassion fatigue through repeated exposures to others' suffering. It begins when an individual with strong empathy responds to someone in distress. Over time, prolonged exposure, combined with other life demands, can lead to residual compassion stress, the emotional residue that remains after helping others. If unmanaged, this stress can build up into compassion fatigue marked by exhaustion, detachment, and reduced empathy. Over here, you can see the professional quality of life model, which measures the positive and negative effects of working and helping professionals. And it focuses on compassion satisfaction and compassion fatigue. Compassion satisfaction reflects fulfillment and reward from helping others, while CF represents the emotional strain from exposure to suffering. Higher CS acts as a protective factor against CF, as when you derive meaning from work, it reduces exhaustion and trauma related stress. For example, a study of 177 Saudi nurses found that higher compassion satisfaction correlated with lower burnout and compassion fatigue. A core study we focused on uses 1,173 police officers and found that roughly 10% reported high compassion fatigue, while about 40% reported low compassion satisfaction, showing a clear negative correlation between the two. Police work demands constant exposure to traumatic events, requiring officers to maintain composure and empathy. Over time, repeated exposures can contribute to elevated CF. Another study investigated CF across different policing roles and found that officers that worked continuous 24-hour shifts reported significant higher levels of compassion fatigue and burnout. This was attributed to frequent exposure to traumatic incidents and inflexible working hours. In the UK, 82.5% of officers experience moderate to high CF, highlighting its prevalence across policing cultures. Key contributors include exposure to violence and death, organizational stress, and lack of social support, all which amplify emotional exhaustion and reduce outlets for processing trauma. So, why is this an issue? A study of 144 US officers found that higher CF predicted greater likelihood of use of force incidents, showing that emotional exhaustion can impair judgment. CF is also linked to psychological strain, sleep disturbance, and maladaptive coping behaviors like alcohol misuse. Low CS and high CF reduces empathy towards the public, job satisfaction, and organizational stability, and contributes to absenteeism and turnover. At home, officers may experience irritability, emotional withdrawal, and strained relationships. A study in Australia shows that police report higher rates of PTSD, psychological distress, and low well being compared to other emergency services, with longer serving officers at greater risk. Despite this, many officers do not receive adequate support. These findings highlight that compassion fatigue poses serious personal, professional, and systematic risks, underscoring the need for interventions that increase compassion satisfaction and reduce fatigue.
So, how do we address this problem? Research has identified two strategies: mindfulness based interventions and self compassion training. First, mindfulness based interventions train officers to observe their thoughts and emotions without judgment, creating space between experience and reaction. MBRT, designed specifically for law enforcement, has shown real results, including better sleep, less stress, and reduced anger and aggression. This emotional awareness helps officers stay calm and empathetic in distressing situations. Second, self compassion training teaches officers to treat themselves with kindness rather than criticism. Research shows self compassion buffers against burnout, cynicism, and harmful coping strategies like alcohol and drug use. When officers are kind to themselves, they process trauma without guilt and emotional shutdown. But here's the problem: there's a major gap in the research. Studies have focused on general stress management and self care strategies, not specifically on compassion fatigue and satisfaction. We lack systematic organizational programs that departments can actually implement. This matters when 10% of officers experience high compassion fatigue and 40% have low compassion satisfaction. Which brings us to our research question: can mindful self compassion training increase self compassion, reduce compassion fatigue, and increase compassion satisfaction in police officers? We predict officers completing the 8-week MSc program will show higher self compassion, lower compassion fatigue, and greater compassion satisfaction.
So, this study uses a between subjects single factor design, specifically a randomized control trial, to investigate whether MSC improves diminished compassion in police. The independent variable is intervention delivery, operationalized as MSC training. The dependent variable is compassion levels, operationalized through subvariable scores of self compassion, compassion fatigue, and compassion satisfaction. To control for individual differences, participants will be randomly assigned to either the intervention group or the waitlist control. To promote engagement and minimize participant outcome reporting biases, all participants will be blinded to the interventional purpose of the study and instead give informed consent to participate in a free division delivered CPD course during work hours. Target sample. With consideration to police complex spiral trauma, its links to compassion dimensions, and the susceptibility of child abuse investigators to compassion fatigue, this study recruits participants from the NYPD Special Victims Division. Following a division wide pre screening for diminished compassion, namely low self compassion, high compassion fatigue, and low compassion satisfaction, 200 officers will be randomly sampled to avoid Marquez et al.'s limitation where moderate to large effect sizes were detected but non-significant due to a small non-randomized sample. Measures. 2 measures will be used for both pre-screening and post-intervention evaluation. First, Ray et al.'s Self-Compassion Scale, SES, examines mindfulness, self-benevolence, universal humanity, self-judgment, isolation, and over-identification to assess positive and negative self-compassion. Its 12 items range from 1, almost never, to 5, almost always. Second, STAM's Professional Quality of Life Scale, ProQOL, comprises 3 subscales, each 10 items ranging from 1, never, to 5, very often. Participants will be scored on the compassion fatigue and compassion satisfaction subscales only. Manipulations. Anderson et al. Suggested that increasing compassion satisfaction levels may reduce compassion fatigue after finding a moderate negative correlation between compassion satisfaction and fatigue amongst 1,351 North American officers. Similarly, Marquez et al. Suggested emphasizing self-compassion in police interventions after correlating self-compassion with compassion satisfaction positively and fatigue negatively. Turgoose et al. Further highlighted mindfulness as a practical, commonly reported strategy for compassion fatigue reduction by police. Thus, this study will deliver mindful self-compassion, MSC, an 8-week intervention shown to improve self-compassion, compassion satisfaction, and compassion fatigue through 2.5-hour training sessions on self-compassion, mindfulness, loving kindness, compassion, and responding to difficult situations. SCS and ProQOL will then be administered to all participants the week after, before post-intervention and control group scores are compared.
To evaluate our hypotheses, we'll compare officers who complete the Mindful Self-Compassion MSc training to those in the control group before and after intervention. We will be looking at the outcomes self-compassion, compassion fatigue, and compassion satisfaction using the self-compassion scale and the professional quality of life scales. We'll be using a two-way ANOVA to test for differences over time between the mindful self-compassion training and the control groups. The MSc group should show greater increase in self-compassion and compassion satisfaction and greater decrease in compassion fatigue than the control group, which supports our hypotheses. We will also run a planned 1-for-any t-test to test significance of MSc group self-compassion pre to post intervention, while the control group scores should remain the same. Based on previous findings, like from Delaney 2018, which found that mindful self-compassion MSc improved compassion and reduced compassion fatigue, based on this, we predict that self-compassion will significantly increase after MSc training, compassion fatigue will significantly decrease, and that compassion satisfaction will significantly increase with large effect sizes, all of which support our hypotheses. To conclude, we expect that officers who complete MSc training will report feeling more compassionate towards self and others and feel less fatigued, which suggests that MSc training could be used practically and could potentially be implemented in police departments. Here are our reference lists. Thank you.